Okay, so the bottom line is the price of a car goes up substantially when you place a tariff on it. We did a study back in 2019, and we were looking, back then the tariffs were threatened to be put on the European Union and Japan. These numbers are going to be much bigger if it's Canada and Mexico, okay? But what we did is, just right, you know, another fact, right? A car has 30,000 plus parts in it, okay? So that's how many things, I don't know what percentage of those parts are made in other countries, but it's big. So we estimated if you put a 25% tariff on just the European Union and Japan, what would happen to the price of a Tennessee vehicle? And so this is all the vehicles that were being made in 2019. And where's the price? There's after the tariff. Where's the previous price? Yes, yeah, MSRP is right there. Okay, and I did add that this is the percentage of the product that is NAFTA, or excuse me, USMCA related. Okay, what you should see from these prices is they're up about 10%, 8 to 12% price increase. Okay, and Canada, Mexico tariffs, much bigger than that. So it's a very big price rise. Most people, if they were shopping for a car, telling them that the price went up by 10%, a lot of those people aren't going to buy that car, okay? They're going to buy a used car, or they're going to buy a cheaper car, or they're going to wait and not buy any car at all. Because and even if they do suck it up and buy the car, now they've got $3,000 or $4,000 left. Right, and this is the case where the person that's hurt by the tariff is the person that makes that something else. Right, they may have no clue as to why their sales went down, but it's because people had to pay more to buy a car, and so they couldn't buy whatever it is that that person is making or selling. Okay? Thank you. So again, I got to turn the other direction. So we made some estimates, and this again, this is lowballing it because Canada and Mexico are much bigger parts of the U.S. automobile industry than is the EU and Japan. Okay, so these are lowball figures, but these were the figures back then. And we estimated that if you raise the prices of cars about 10%, you're gonna, this is the state of Tennessee, you're gonna lose about 11% of your auto production. Okay, and that works out to about 8,000 jobs. 7,815 jobs would get lost because of the lower production. You don't need as much labor, right? A lot of those jobs, though, are not going to be in the auto industry. They're going to be in industries that service the automobile industry, or they are going to be people who rely on the incomes of people that are working in the automotive industry. You know, everything from a hairdresser to what? Right, I think it's about a third we estimated. Maybe I have a number up there. Yeah, about 1/3 of the job losses are going to be outside the industry. Okay, so this is bad news for the auto industry, but it's bad news for everybody in Tennessee if something like that happens. Okay, next slide. So this is my big conclusion here, but it's just tariffs. It is a tax. Somebody has to pay the tax. That person's going to have less income, or that industry is going to have less income. They're going to need less labor, so the labor is going to have less income. And my final takeaway here is when you put a tariff on a product, somebody somewhere pays. Okay, and as these stories indicate exactly who, you can't always tell, but somebody will. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Livingston. And I will say after the panel discussion, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So please do write down your questions, but we'll take them all at the end. I'd next like to go to Jimmy Tosh, who is going to talk a little bit about specifically ag impacts in Tennessee. Let's hand this on down to Jimmy.
Good morning. Uh, go ahead and bring the slides up. Yeah, I give him a stick. I think I did.
You got a stick there?
No, I give it to him.
Yeah, I think that's it. Let's just take a minute to get those loaded up. Sorry about that.
No, I'm not the only one that has computer issues. All right, I'm Jim Tosh from Henry, Tennessee. My first slide actually had some introduction on it, but we're a grain farmer and a pork producer in Henry, Tennessee. If nobody knows where Henry's at, they may know where Routen's at. So, now we're about 10 miles south of Paris. We're about 125 miles west of here. We grow corn, soybeans, wheat, canola, rapeseed, and have a fairly sizable hog operation. It's a family operation. My family's been in production in that community since 1913. I've got 2 sons involved in the operation, and hopefully they're coming on, and got some grandkids, and they're already fighting over who's going to get our house when I die. So we'll see how that works out. One thing on the first slide is revenue. When you have decreased revenue and increased expense, that's not a very good combination for a business. And I think we're going to be looking at both of them, increase expense and less income. I've got some slides later on of the Chicago Board of Trade prices over the last 2 weeks, how they have affected prices that we receive in agriculture. Okay.
We'll switch up the order a little bit. So
That's okay. I'm slideless, so it'll make it easy and hopefully helpful. Actually, my esteemed co-panelist here covered some of the things I was going to mention, because I'd like to put Tennessee moonshine on the list of Tennessee products which are going to get hit by the tariffs. But just to give you some ideas on the current situation relating to spirits, because I'm responsible for Old Smoky Distillery, which is very pleased to welcome you here today, because this is one of our 4 distilleries which are open to the public. So as guests, we hope you enjoy yourself while you're here. But we also have a very significant wholesale business where we sell to liquor stores around the country and to Canada, Australia, and 20 other countries around the world. So let me just give you a sense of the current situation of tariffs. U.S. spirits for the last quite a few years have had a 0-for-0 tariff relationship with the EU, UK, Mexico, Canada, 47 other countries. And over that time of free trade, spirits have grown quite significantly. Between the EU and the US, for example, between 1997 to 18, trade in spirits grew 450%. So that's, over 4 times. And 44 of the US states export spirits. And this has contributed to the growth of the spirits business. In 2005, there were only 100 distilleries in the US, and today there's over 3,000. And the ability to export has been an element of that growth. Now, all this changed on Tuesday when tariffs were enacted on goods from Canada and Mexico. It changed this morning, just an hour or so before this panel started, when the tariffs on Mexican products were deferred for another month till April the 2nd. So we'll see what happens April the 2nd. But as of this panel starting, I don't know what's happened while we've been up here. Something could have changed. But as of when this panel started, the tariffs were still in place on Canadian goods. That's significant. It's significant for the reasons that my esteemed co-panelists mentioned about prices going up. But there's two real points that I want to make. One is retaliation, and the doctor here mentioned retaliation. And what's going on in Canada is really a disproportionate retaliation because there's a lot of emotion there. Canada has enacted reciprocal tariffs, 25% going up, but because the spirits products are controlled by each of the provinces, it's government-controlled distribution of spirits in Canada, like it is in 17 states around the U.S. North Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi are controlled by the state government. Tennessee is not, but those states are. The Canadian provinces are like those control states in the U.S., like North Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, etc. They have stated that they're going to take American products off the shelves. So our sales to Canada evaporated on Tuesday. And that's a very significant impact to a company when just your sales evaporate. It's not like we're just having our products exported to Canada taxed by the 25%. That would be bad. But they've now been taken off the shelves. So there's a significant retaliatory impact. I want to mention a different point, but it's really, really important. The purpose of tariffs usually is to bring jobs back to the country that is imposing those tariffs on imported products because it's making imported products more expensive. That presumes you can make the product in this country. But many spirits products are what's called distinctive products with a geographical indication. I don't know if you know this, but tequila can only be made in 6 states in Mexico, surrounding the town of Tequila. Champagne can't be made anywhere else other than in the Champagne region in France, for example. Scotch whiskey can only be made in you guess where. So quite a number of spirits products have this geographical indication, and it means they can't be produced in the US. Bourbon can't be produced anywhere else in the world other than in the US. So we've got, a product on our own. Tennessee moonshine can only be made in Tennessee. So that's a very important fact. So there's a strong case that spirits should not be included in the tariff because they're not going to result in job gains because you can't make tequila in the US. In fact, it'll result in job losses for the reasons that Stephen mentioned, because the prices of the products are going to go up, which is going to pass through to retail, to the restaurants and bars, and through the distribution channel. And in hospitality, there's over 15 million jobs in the US. And so if you just lose a very small proportion of them through these tariffs because tequila prices have gone up and Scotch whiskey prices, if there's tariffs on EU, those prices are going to go up, job losses. And analysts, just over the last few days since the 25% tariffs went on in Mexico and Canada, have estimated between 17 and 31,000 jobs lost in those industries of hospitality and retail and distribution just because of these tariffs. So there's going to be no job gain because you can't make tequila in the US, and there's going to be job losses. So we believe that getting back to zero tariffs is a very important thing to do. We support the administration's goal to generate jobs in the US. That's very, very important. But this, we don't believe, is the right way to do it. So hopefully with that, I've paused long enough. And it's your turn, Mr. Tosh, to go ahead. Is he ready? You ready with the slides?
All right, this is just a little overview of our company. We're located in northwest Tennessee in Henry County. We farm about 17,000 acres. Got 38,000 sows. We sell about 1.1 million hogs a year. Actually, we sell enough hogs to supply half the state of Tennessee in pork. Not that all of our pork comes to Tennessee for sure, but we do produce quite a few pigs. We're about the 25th largest producer in the country. We got 500 plus employees. We do have a construction and trucking division. And immigrant labor is very, very important to agriculture. And we use TNs and H2As in our operation. Next. All right. We already talked about potential tariff effects, lower revenue, you get lower prices for your product, you have lower revenue, increased costs, fertilizer, equipment, vitamins, minerals, etc. Lots of y'all don't realize, but the majority of our vitamins and minerals are coming from overseas, a majority of them from China. This is potash. This is the fertilizer used in row crop. The three critical nutrients in crop production is nitrogen, potash, and phosphorus. This is potash. We receive somewhat over 80% of our production from Canada. 25% increase in that is going to be very significant to our bottom line as far as cost increases. Next. Mentioned that crop ag is we're in a recession now. I've had 4 farmers in our neighborhood that had to sell out this year. This could move us from a recession into depression on the crop side. Livestock side is still doing pretty well, especially the cattle market. I don't know how these tariffs will affect the cattle. I think there's over 2 million head of cattle shipped into this country to go into feedlots, and beef is already in short supply. So I don't know really how that's going to affect that. I'm not familiar with the beef industry. I have a problem with the USMCA. Trump said it's the greatest trade agreement ever negotiated. Now we're trying to change it without any negotiation. I really have a problem with that. When you do a deal, you need to stay with it to the length of it, or you need to try to renegotiate it. It's going to spur other countries in agricultural production. Brazil, especially Brazil, has increased their soybean production dramatically since the earlier tariffs in 2018. They're trying to increase their pork production. Brazil is going to be a force in the agricultural market going forward. The duties and fees is, some talk that the importers pay it. The importers in this country that receive it is the one to pay it. It's really a tax on the consumers in this country. It's not a tax on the country that supplies us the product. Next. Whatever happens, it's going to raise the price of cars. It's going to raise the price for U.S. consumers. There's no way around it. Not many avocados produced in the U.S. They're in Mexico. You're going to see that fairly soon, I believe. But it did get delayed today for 30 days. I will say a 25% tariff is not necessarily a 25% price increase, because you have profit margins, you have transportation, you have other things involved in that. So you may not see a full 25% increase, because there's other things that go into pricing products. The government paid us, I say us, the farmers, in 2019, $28 billion for the market access transport payment for the market we lost from China on the soybean tariffs. We got $33 billion in 2020, and the President and the Secretary of Agriculture already saying they're going to make payments to the farmers to make us whole again. The problem with these payments, the payments for 1 or 2 years, but the losses of market share over a long period of time. And I already mentioned about a farm out getting a bail out going forward. I'm fairly certain that's probably going to happen if these tariffs are put on. One of the things I found out doing research is how much Jack Daniels is exported as liquid corn. 65% of their production in Lynchburg is exported, so it's going to be very significant to them. And you say, well, how does that affect agriculture? They use 40,000 bushels of corn a day in Lynchburg to make alcohol. So that's just one side of how it could affect us. I'm just going through the numbers of how much of our crops are exported. 16.5% of our corn, 42% of our soybeans, 43% of our wheat, 35% of our cotton, and 27% of our pork. Mexico is our largest market for both corn and pork. About 30% of our exports go to Mexico. They love our hams. Hams go into tacos, and it's a very, very important market for us. Hopefully we will be excluded from tariffs from Mexico on pork, but who knows right now. You can't see this, but we do import some products, mainly from China. The import duty there is $16,000 on this invoice here. The freight was $5,500. Freight's one of the most variable things, as you see. Well, I've seen it high as $25,000 per container from China during the COVID. It's more in the $5,000 to $8,000 range is usually where it stays. You might ask why we buy stuff from China. I can show you a drive that goes on a chain disc that in China is $18.20. Tariffs get it up to in the mid-30 range. From one of the suppliers in the U.S., it's $120. That's the reason you buy products overseas, because they're so much cheaper. And I'm a businessman, I like to make money. Here's a chart of, that happens to be corn. You can see when the tariff conversation really got started about 2 weeks ago, how the corn market has fell from $5 to in the $4.40 range. Next. A little same way on cotton. It's been in a downtrend for a pretty good while, but it was accelerated in the last couple of weeks. Next. Wheat, same way. All right, April hogs, they kind of near and dear to our hearts. They have fell from 94 cents. This is April futures. They fell from 94 cents to about 84 cents in the last 2 weeks. To translate that into dollars in the operation, $10 a hundredweight on hogs is about $22 a head. We sell 1.1 million head of hogs a year. Calculate that, it's a little more than pocket change. Now we have had some decrease in feed costs because corn price has gone down, but not to offset the price of hogs. All right, any questions, comments? But I think we're holding them for later.
My name's Matt Millsap. I'm a general contractor. My company is Buildco 7. We build primarily residential homes here in Nashville. Tariffs have an interesting impact on the construction industry. What we see is lumber. We get a ton of lumber from Canada, but we also have a ton of lumber locally. But when the tariffs come in from Canada, our local suppliers, they just raise their prices. So lumber companies and lumber suppliers it's really good for them. Now, what does that do for us? It squeezes the general contractor, and it squeezes real estate in general. All prices go up, and can the market afford those prices to go up? Usually the answer is no. It's going to put a long-term demand, or rather lessen a demand on demand. So the labor that we're seeing is there'll be less people needed to build houses because there's going to be less demand for the houses. So we see it's good for some of our suppliers. Their margins are going to go up, lumber companies and whatnot, and then it squeezes us. We're kind of the middle guy, the general contractor. So our margins just continue to shrink. It has an impact across, let me get my notes out here, guys. It's got an impact across our margins. Some of the long-term effects are going to be the market dynamics and who's going to put their money where, how much money is going to go into construction. So we've got a lot. It even bleeds down from when we're talking about the car manufacturers. When those guys lose their jobs, they're not buying houses, so there's less demand for housing. When there's less demand for housing, it can push prices down, and will the prices keep up with the increase in cost? And usually the answer is no. And so what happens there is oftentimes you're going to see some builders go out of business. You're going to see some builders that can hang in there until this all shakes out for us. But the big impact is prices go up, and for us, we can get our stuff down in Alabama, and regionally it affects each market differently. But I'd say overall it just pushes all the prices up, squeezing the margins for the GC. So that's the impact what we're going to see in general contracting and the housing market.
So we're gonna take some questions. I'm gonna take moderator's prerogative first and just ask a question, then we'll go out to the audience. So think about your questions real quick. But I do want to pick up on one theme I heard throughout the presentation, which is supply chain disruption. And sort of when you're impacted, it doesn't just impact you, it's impacting upstream and downstream. Maybe you could talk just a little bit about who you buy products from that might be impacted, or who you sell products to, who your employees are. How can this ripple through the economy? And let's just take it in no particular order. Why don't we start with you, Robert?
Well, alcohol needs grain, and grain comes from farmers. So if our volumes are affected, as they will be with this loss of the Canadian business, again, if it sticks, but it certainly looks like it is at the moment, we'll be buying less grain. There's 2.8 billion pounds of grain are used in the spirits business. You know, very significant, and that volume could go down. As I mentioned earlier, on the other side of the supply chain, we sell to distributors who then sell to retailers and restaurants. The hospitality business has had a tough time. You know, it really went through a lot with COVID. It's starting to recover, but you're still seeing a lot of restaurant bankruptcies. I wouldn't be surprised if the tariffs stick over the fullness of time. There could be, you know, more squeezing in that industry as well, which I think could be very significant for the downstream side of supply.
You might have to repeat the question, because I'm 75, I'm getting old.
Who do you buy from and who do you sell to? Who else is going to be impacted if you're impacted?
Well, all our pigs go to JBS, and if you can't sell the pork overseas, you eat it here in the U.S. It's not a storable commodity. You either eat it or smell it. So it's going to drastically lower the prices. Probably the consumer. That's one of the benefits, I guess, of tariffs. It will lower prices on industries that are very dependent on the export market. And I don't know. I just don't see any good out of these tariffs. If you had time to adjust, if we had a 5 to 7 year time frame to know that these tariffs are going to come on, you got time to adjust. But you know, we just had a change this morning. The Mexico tariffs are not going to go on, and you cannot run a business with the uncertainty that we've got today. Certainty is very important in business, and being in agriculture is a very variable business. There's lots of things to deal with. You saw the charts on pigs up there and how much they have changed. Fortunately, we hedged a bunch, and we're in good shape for this year, but the uncertainty just you cannot run a business with uncertainty we've got in the industry now.
So I think for us, you're going to see the lumber companies love it when the price of lumber goes up, because they're marking it up 10%, whether they're buying it at $10 or $15. So the vertical impact is going to be good. You know, some of the lumber companies locally, they had their best years ever during the COVID crisis in the material supplies. Who gets squeezed is the general contractor, and then the general public. You know, they're going to pay more for those houses if the market can bear that. So I think you're going to see the impact. It's got the pluses and minuses. Go ahead. Yeah, for us, the uncertainty is our projects take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months to complete. So we're kind of gambling from the jump. Like, as soon as we start that project, is it going to cost us what we thought it's going to cost us? Are we going to be able to sell it for what we thought we're going to be able to sell it for? So the uncertainty can, you know, it can make or break you in a construction project that could go on for, you know, 12, 18 months. So I think that's where we see the impact in construction is just on the margins at the end of the project. So what we're seeing today may or may not affect us 18 months from now.
Well, we're going to build a sow unit this year, which we didn't have plans to do it, but if we did have plans to do it, I probably would hold off. I mean, that's a $20 million investment just in that one facility, and then you got to have finishing facilities behind that. You got to have feed mill capacity and stuff. So with uncertainties there, I would not make that investment today. I just happened to talk to a producer from Canada. We do business with him. We buy some heat mats from him. But he knew, he's not the producer, but he knew of a producer that had finishing in North Dakota. Probably a $15 to $20 million investment. That's where you ship the small pigs to be finished out to market. He can't send pigs to North Dakota now because it would definitely put him in a loss situation. So he's going to keep the pigs in Canada or he's going to sell them in Canada. So you cannot run a multi-million-dollar business with the uncertainty we've gotten today. We did take some uncertainty out of the hog price this year. As I said earlier, we did do some hedging this year because I was scared to death of the tariffs. And we've had a big decrease in the market over the last 2 weeks. And I think there's been some recovery today, but of course, commodity market is always volatile. I mean, if you want to deal with volatility, get into the commodity market.
Well, I'll just come at it a little differently. I talk to trade organizations, and the thing they always stress is how long it takes to build an importer-exporter relationship. There's great distance between the two, and so what are the key things? Well, the key things are keeping your word and reliability. And the uncertainty here is if you're not sure what somebody can or will do in the future, the relationship breaks down. And they aren't easily repaired. You can't just come back 2 weeks later and say, well, forget all about that and let's go back to the way it used to be. I mean, that's gone. And you've really got to start all over.
When the only certainty is uncertainty, I see two implications. On a short-term basis, it's a real distraction. When all you're spending your time thinking about is what's going to happen to our tequila imports or what's going to happen to Old Smoky in Canada and how we're going to adjust our production schedules, etc. And then it changes like it did Tuesday to Thursday of this week. It's just very distracting because you're not putting your focus on building the business and creating jobs, here in America because we're trying to build a business. So that's number one. I think the second, and it builds on some comments that were made by my colleagues here. When you're making long-term decisions, it took us about 2 years to build this place. It's a big place. People love it. As a result of this and our distilleries in Sevier County in East Tennessee, Old Smoky is the most visited distillery in the world. Over 5 million people came through our doors last year, which most people don't even realize, but we're the most visited distillery in the world. There's one in China that gets 1 million people, and they think that's a lot. We get 5 million. All of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, 134 distilleries, gets about just a little over 2 million. All of Napa gets 3.6. We get 5 million. So these locations are very important. We're contemplating building 2 more, one in the state, one out of state. The one out of state has been announced in Myrtle Beach. The one in state has not yet been announced because the paperwork is not final. But when you're thinking about, tariffs on the business that could affect steel, steel is certainly one of the topics that's being discussed in Washington at the moment, steel and aluminum, a lot of steel needs to go into these buildings. And we just heard the other day, one of my colleagues told me that steel has already started to go up in price. And that's the price side, but then there could be availability issues as well, because tariffs do threaten the supply chain. So it really puts long-term investments in jeopardy. I'm thinking about it from ours, but just think about houses. There's many more houses than our distilleries. So it really creates uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, you tend not to push the button on investments, which could lower job creation because we're going to hire a lot of construction people to do our work. It takes a lot of people to do this. It takes a lot of people to bend the steel and to make the pipes, etc. And it could well cause delays, which could well defer job gains as a result of that. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Like, we've seen that uncertainty that we're talking about and that keeps coming up. I've had the question, how are tariffs going to affect our project, Matt? And my answer is, well, are you going to sign the contract today? Because if you sign it today, we can buy our lumber today, and then they don't impact us. If you're going to wait 3 months, I can't tell you what it's going to do. So I think that uncertainty, people are definitely, they hold on to their wallets. When things are uncertain, they keep their wallets in their pocket. And I've seen, you know, several $1 million worth of contracts just on hold. So I think if we can get past this uncertainty and past the unknown, you know, that's a good thing.
Thank you for that, and thank you for that question, Molly. Any other questions? Back there, yeah?
It's scary, and builders will get clobbered, and we saw that in 2019 and 2020, 21, where lumber prices doubled or went up 30, 40, 50% overnight, and the contractor takes it on the chin, and a profitable job goes into unprofitable, and it puts some guys out of business. So that's a concern that we should all have.
And I have to believe you start pricing in that risk immediately, that if you know prices may go up, you're going to start bidding it at a slightly higher price. Is that right?
We estimate at our lumber, we estimate at COVID pricing. We never dropped it down because there is so much volatility in the market. But then you lose jobs because you overpriced the job by $50,000 or $60,000 because you're trying to like hedge your bets. But we've certainly have seen it.
Great. Other questions? Yes. Did everyone hear that question?
Can't be right on everything. One thing I'd like to, it hasn't been mentioned, is we talk about lumber, but Tennessee is a very large exporter of hardwood lumber, and it's going to affect them too. It's going to decrease their sales, and we need to keep that in mind.
I respect the governor's opinion, but we're in a democracy and we can have different opinions. And I think, you know, free trade in the business that I'm responsible for, which is spirits, has proved to be successful for the state of Tennessee over a long term. And I believe it would be continue to be successful in the future if that situation does return. We would encourage it to return. because the tariffs on Canadian products, which don't have a direct impact on us, are having an impact through the retaliatory actions of Canada and the provinces, and that will have a negative impact on our business. So I would have a different opinion than a governor, even though I respect his opinion.
And the one thing I would add too is, and Jimmy Tosh hit on this, one of the things that I find particularly frustrating is that we negotiated the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement in 2019. President Trump took the lead in that negotiation. Congress passed it by historic margins. Farmers for Free Trade, we put an RV on the road through 30 states in support of that trade agreement. It's a great trade agreement. It's stabilized trade relations between Mexico and Canada, two of our largest export destinations for U.S. ag, our closest neighbors. We created one of the world's largest trading blocs. So we have an agreement in place. It's not the kind of thing that a country should lightly then tear up an agreement. A deal should be a deal. Great countries, like great people, should keep their word. And so it's very troubling to me that if we have a trade agreement, we should renegotiate the trade agreement if we messed up. If it was a bad trade agreement, we should renegotiate it. We shouldn't just unilaterally pull out of it. And I worry that that also then reflects on, it creates uncertainty in the global market as we try to open new markets. Countries are going to be less willing to negotiate with us because they're going to say, well, is your word worth anything? And what that means is that countries will start to orient toward other trade blocs. So European Union will take on more heft because countries will say, well, we can depend on the EU. China will take on more heft. China seems to be more free trade at this point than the United States, and there's something really wrong with the world if that's the case. So I think there's a lot of ripple effects from just walking away from a trade agreement that we just negotiated. Other questions? Please, go ahead.
It certainly isn't on the economics. I mean, rationally, I can't give you an explanation. I think I'll leave it at that.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Please. We have time for just one more question if there is any. Let's go right here. Yeah, go ahead. Pork producers. Sure. Yeah, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So we held an event on Tuesday. Every year there's Commodity Classic, which if you're not from ag, it's the large commodity conference, wonderful trade show. It was held in Denver this year. So we had a Tariff Town Hall event in Denver on Tuesday at the end of Commodity Classic. And it was co-hosted by the Denver World Trade Center. And like this panel, a really interesting conversation with a mix of people at the table. We had folks representing Colorado Corn. So Colorado Corn Council was there, their executive director, talking about the impact on corn in particular. But then we had a breadth of industries. We had a person from a pet food manufacturer and how they were being impacted. A woman CEO of a company called Denver Concrete Vibrator, which makes vibration equipment for concrete manufacturing, and how they're being impacted by steel and aluminum. We had a woman from a woman-owned business, Crimson Clover, that makes women's clothing and outdoor gear, and how they're being impacted. So again, you can just see it ripple through an economy when you hear those kind of stories from individual businesses. It certainly impacts ag, but it's cross-sector, and very significant impacts on states like Tennessee. So thank you for that. So with that, we're going to bring this town hall to a close. I would close with a couple of thoughts. Number one, please do help yourself to food if you haven't already, so we don't want to have food waste. Number two, Kyle, raise your hand, will you, Kyle? This is Kyle who's videoing this event. Kyle is available to do stand-up interviews afterwards with anyone from the audience or the panel. We'll turn those into social media clips and circulate. Part of what we're trying to do is have this as a national conversation. So if you want to help us out by filming a stand-up with Kyle, that would be great, and that would help us to spread the message. But again, thank you all for coming, and thank you for taking part of your Thursday to join us for this conversation. Hopefully it was informative. Any closing remarks from anyone on the panel? Last chance. All right. Thank you to the panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.